uh, our next IMAUG presentation. If you want to connect with us, as always, a lot of our stuff is on Meetup. We do have a Slack and YouTube page, so if you have any of these recordings you want to come back to, or maybe forward to a colleague or revisit, feel free to come back to our YouTube page. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to any one of us on the organizing board. You will see a new name here, Robert Duval from Sagetti. He's taking the place of Corey Gideon. And yeah. And always, if you want to do some learning, Microsoft Learn is a great place to start. They have a bunch of stuff there as far as certifications and training, Pluralsights, and Microsoft Cloud training events as well. I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Source Allies, Lean Technique, Growers Edge, and Lozano Tech. And today's topic will be over Azure Sentinel. And then the third will actually be our first in-person event at Source Allies. The topic is TBD, but it is also going to be switching to a PM event. We'll put more messaging out there about the time changing. We're going to provide some food and just get to see everybody in person for the first time. So that's real exciting. And we'll see how that all works out. And then the 17th, we'll be talking about Azure Chaos Studios and Azure load testing from Mike Douglas. That one will be virtual. And with that, I will hand it over to Rod.
All right. Well, thank you. That was awesome. I love that schedule. May 3rd, in person. I feel a little, I don't know, a little left out now. I'm still virtual. After today, hopefully you'll like what I have to talk about enough that, maybe you'll have me up that way.
Get you to come down here.
Absolutely. It's funny while I get my little slide deck up here. It's funny. I've been so bored and tired of virtual things for so long. Most of the event that I do anymore, that's my first question is it in person? And they're like, nope, sorry. Because I'm really, really hungry to get in person. I went to my first in-person conference in like 2 years in November. Are y'all familiar? Heard this conference called the Midwest Management Summit, potentially. It's all Defender for endpoint and stuff like that, but it's a really good one. So trying to get Teams to work sometimes. I'm just going to do the whole screen. Yeah, I'll do the whole screen. You all see my screen?
Yep.
Give me those little thumbs up or something. Make sure everybody can. It's hard to know, right? Doing this virtual stuff for so long. I will tell you, I am going to take my camera off to give more performance back to PowerPoint. That's always useful. And all right, I think that's all I need to do there. In doing so, understand that if you all have questions or comments that you put in the chat, I'm not going to be able to see them until somebody raises an alarm and alert that there is a question. So, but please don't hesitate to ask those questions.
I'll watch the chat for you and let you know if there's anything.
Okay, I appreciate that. That would be awesome. All right, so thank you so much for allowing me to come and talk about one of my absolute favorite topics in the world, Microsoft Sentinel. Here's what I want to talk about today. We have kind of limited time, about an hour or something like that, and I want to be mindful of time, but at the same time, I do want to kind of get us started. As I noted, I would absolutely love to be there in person with you all. Derek mentioned, hey, if everything goes well, maybe we can have Rob back. I think that would be awesome. So I'm really just going to kind of start from the basics with Microsoft Sentinel today. I don't know what your experiences are. In fact, I have a little survey for you to take here in a second, and we'll do it that way. I got a little survey so I know exactly what your experience is with Sentinel, what you've heard about it, and all that good kind of stuff. But here's the agenda. Here's what I kind of want to talk about today. Anybody that you talk with at Microsoft, no matter what product they talk about, whether it's Office, Defender for Office, 365, Defender, all of those Defender products. And in fact, later today, I don't know if I should say this, I'll just tell you, we're having another rebranding party this afternoon in about 2 hours. So just kind of look for that. I can't tell you what that rebranding party is and the product names are yet because it's still not released. But yeah, you'll hear about that here shortly. But anytime you talk to a Microsoft person, they kind of start with the zero trust. To me, I think that's hugely important. So I want to talk about zero trust a little bit. You've probably heard this to the point of, I just don't want to hear it anymore. But it does lead to our topic today, which is Microsoft Sentinel, because I think to me, it's important to know where that kind of fits within that zero trust model. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but I don't want to spend a lot of time in the slides, right? So I do have some slides to kind of talk through just again to get us where we need to be when I jump into my own console and show you a few things again from a kind of a base standpoint of Microsoft Sentinel, just so we all together understand what this product is and what its intent is for your organization. So I'll spend a lot of time in the console. To start out though, as I kind of start talking through here, here's a short link to a Sentinel survey. So aka.ms/Sentinel experience EXP survey. If you go out there, if you wouldn't mind opening a browser window and going out there, it's one question. The answers are maybe a little silly, couple of them, but that really, and this is what it looks like. Just the Microsoft Sentinel experience. Just go out there and let me know what your experience with Sentinel. So as we go through today, I can kind of spend and focus more of the time where it needs to be focused. While you're doing that, I'm going to switch back here and talk a little bit about myself, because nobody wants to hear about me really. So while you're doing that survey, I'll do my little brag stuff here, right? So Rod Trent, I'm a cloud security advocate at Microsoft. People hear that, they're like, what the heck is an advocate? In the old days, it was an evangelist or a community person or what have you. Cloud security advocate, I'm focused 100% on our Microsoft security platforms and services and products and things like that. I am, though, hyper-focused on cybersecurity, in particular Microsoft Sentinel, Defender for Cloud, our security.microsoft.com, our unified console and things like that. But I do focus a lot on Microsoft Sentinel. In fact, I think for about 3 years, I've literally pulled up that console, just like our customers do every day, and worked in that Microsoft Sentinel console for one reason or another, either to create demos, help our customers, help generate analytics rules when new things have been announced, new threats in the industry. I help our Mystic team sometimes. We create analytics rules and things and stuff for that. So I do spend a lot of time there. I am, by all points, a public person. And if you want to reach out, ask questions later, don't hesitate to do that. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always on Twitter. My email address is really not that difficult. It's just rod.trent@microsoft.com. So again, if you have questions, a little bit more, a little personally there. I have to do this. I absolutely have to do this because, oh my goodness, I love my grandboy. So I'm a new grandpa as of almost about a year ago, but that's like one of the absolute best things about me right now is being a grandpa, because this guy is absolutely amazing. I don't know how many grandparents we have listening in, but it's an absolutely amazing thing. So husband, dad, grandfather, or G-pop, as my kids want me to be called, but whatever he decides to call me once he actually starts talking regularly, then that's what I'm going to be called. I don't care. I run a lot. I work with this crazy KQL language, Kusto. You saw my screen earlier. I'm a huge fan of the $6 Million Man. And there's other ways to stay in touch. My blog, I produce a weekly Microsoft Sentinel newsletter and a weekly Microsoft Defender newsletter. If you're interested in getting information about that stuff, there you go. All right. So I want to, as noted, want to talk about zero trust for a second, but let me check the. All right, we got 9 responses. Heard of it. That's about it. I appreciate that. Isn't it an enemy of the X-Men? That's absolutely awesome. I love that you selected that one. Seen it poked around. So we have a little bit of experience, or at least, kind of periphery knowledge of Sentinel, which is awesome. So that gives me a lot to work with, and I think that's great. All right. So as I said, I want to focus primarily on Microsoft Sentinel today. Okay, but I thought it would also help to provide kind of this overall view of Microsoft security first, right? From this kind of zero trust topic that you probably heard about a lot, almost like a sort of a state of the union, if you will. Okay, again, to help get us to that point within Microsoft Sentinel, to get us to what we want to talk about today. And it's always useful, I think. And when you talk about whatever product it is, Defender for Cloud Apps, or MCAS, as I still call it, Defender for Cloud, where does this stuff fit in the zero trust model? It really kind of helps understand what that product's capability is. All right. Anybody remember this trust but verify proverb? If you're not familiar, it was popularized by Ronald Reagan, right? But it's actually a Russian proverb, which I don't think too many people realize, and especially today with things going on in the world, nobody wants to say that, but trust but verify, and that's literally what we do with Microsoft Sentinel. That's very much where we want to get today when we talk about this. All right, so some things to understand about our interest in security within our products and our commitment here, right? So at Microsoft, for many years, we've spent over $1 billion literally every year on research and this development to help our organizations, help our customers secure their organization, right? And attempting to do it from a standpoint without compromising that productivity. It's one thing, and I come from the old days working on premises. The cloud didn't exist when I started in IT, and if you put down and laid out processes and policies and things that kept users from doing their job, they would complain, and you would hear about it, and you have to kind of pull everything back, right? So we're trying to help allow our customers develop these organizations that can secure their environment without losing that productivity, because as soon as a contract isn't signed or can't work with a customer or a partner or something like that, then that feature or that function just literally gets unused, right? And that's kind of sad operations when it comes from a security perspective. All right. So we do all this. We do this through our operations, our technology, our engineering, and our partnerships. So earlier this year, I'm sorry, it was earlier last year, I think it was, right? So yeah, it was August 2021. We announced with the White House even more investment beyond what we've invested already. Before the investment, we're spending like $1 billion per year on security, and our new commitment is this $20 billion over the next 5 years. That's literally like a 4 times increase, right? But what makes us so different, not just the investment of the money, we hire global security experts constantly. We have our Mystic team, we have our Dart team, we have people internally that hunt through and look for security issues in our own environment. We have 3,500 plus global security experts that we hire and have on staff to help us, to help our customers, to help our partners, right? Talk about this trillions of diverse signals for unparalleled threat intelligence. I don't know who came up with that, but I could never say it 10 times real quick and get it right every time. I'd probably stumble over it, but that's kind of important, right? When you think about what we do and what we provide for our customers, all the way from Office to a lot of our other products, not even talking about security at this point, as our customers use our own products, there's signals that get developed and created as part of those. And at Microsoft, we take that and develop it into intelligence that's fed back into our products. So essentially, when you think about it, the more of our products that you use, the more you're actually helping yourself from a security perspective. And to us, we think that's hugely important. We are at Microsoft, uniquely positioned in this space because everybody uses Office, right? If you're using Office, you have users that are clicking on silly things in their emails and doing all kinds of silly things on their devices. We're going to catch it, right? We're going to find those anomalous things. We're going to develop it into new threat intelligence. We're going to feed it back into the system. So these trillions of diverse signals for unparalleled threat intelligence, that's actually pretty important. From a comfort level, from a customer perspective, it's absolutely important to understand that you are literally protecting yourself. All right. So you probably heard the phrase zero trust ad nauseum. a lot recently. I mean, Microsoft folks talk about it all the time. I think Derek mentioned it at the beginning. Hey, zero trust, does that keep you busy? And while the buzzwords and phrase can sometimes get monotonous, the way that we, talk about things or we rebrand things and stuff like this, zero trust actually has a lot to it. And there's a lot of importance here. Okay. So at its core, zero trust is a set of recommendations, methodologies that literally anyone can adopt to ensure that they have a better, more secure environment, right? These are essentially the things as IT and operations folks we've talked about for years, like don't give people admin rights on their PC, okay? But we finally developed some tried and true processes around it so it's easier to understand and follow, right? And which I'll talk about here shortly, we've used this model here to develop service and product coverage for every single aspect, all of these different pillars you see here, right? This is the architecture that has been defined so far, which it's always evolving, for zero trust, right? So it starts with identity. Essentially, no one who is requesting access is absolutely essential. If you don't have identity, security on identity, you literally have nothing else, right? If you're not controlling or managing those users' requests. Then you need to verify the device that user is using, right? Number one, that user profile. Number two, those devices that user is using. Then we want to figure out how we're going to protect that data, whether it's through auto classification, encryption, compliance, whatever that happens to be. That's the next pillar. Then we want to harden those applications. After the data, then we want to harden the applications. Absolutely tedious job to do that, but it's absolutely necessary, right? So as part of that pillar, throwing applications into that, right? Then we want to protect the infrastructure, right? We in the early days, it was, we had network engineers and network admins and things like this. But from a security perspective, we bring those people together with everything else we're doing. And this is where we start to protect that infrastructure, right? So it starts with identity and covers the full breadth of the entire organization, right? And then finally, but just as important, is the governing of the network, right? We need to mitigate lateral movement by using intelligent, adaptive segmentation, right? Across all the workloads, whether they're on premises or in the cloud, this hybrid model, protecting any anomalous patterns that we can detect or find, right? So these are the aspects and areas where zero trust absolutely must apply. There must be coverage in and attention to all these areas. How you do it, how you define it, the tools you use are up to you. But these are the pillars, these are the things where, from a security perspective, that you can get caught up all the way from on-premises to Azure to whatever cloud it is that you determine that you need to use. All right. So how do we at Microsoft address each of these, right? We developed a set of tools based on policies and our own unique knowledge and applied them directly to each area, right? Let's go back down through this again. We've got our identity. That's where Microsoft Azure AD and things like MFA and things like that come across. So we are helping our customers, or at least giving them the tools to manage that zero trust pillar, all right? Jumping down to the devices and endpoints, we have Microsoft Endpoint Manager, the data classification and the applications. So we're monitoring the data classification with Microsoft Information Protection, the apps with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, or MCAS. I still call it MCAS. I hate that rebranding. And then Azure Networking for the infrastructure and the network. But as I mentioned earlier, this whole where we want to get to, this whole trust but verify thing, right? If you look way down at the bottom, Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Defender XDR, right? As I promised, this is where I want to put my focus. So we're almost done with the slides here, okay? And I want to jump into the console and show you some real things. But as promised, I want to focus today on this piece, this Microsoft Sentinel piece, all right? So I want to spend the rest of the time talking about this catch-all product, what we call Microsoft Sentinel. Sometimes I call it a sluice box or a cyclorama, a lot of weird fancy words. Sluice box, I absolutely love that term when we think about Microsoft Sentinel, when you think about what this tool is supposed to accomplish. I don't know if you've watched, I watch History Channel a lot. Okay, so tonight, one of my favorite shows is on TV. I'm addicted to Curse of Oak Island. It's about digging and looking for things. They're trying to find treasure. I don't know if you're familiar with the show. There's other shows like it where they're digging for gold, and they'll use these massive pieces of machinery, right, to dig in the earth and pull out all this dirt and look for something. But so they don't miss anything, they take this dirt and they stick it in this mechanism, this what's called a sluice box, where the water runs through and it pushes out the stuff that they don't want, and it retains the things that they have to kind of look at and identify whether or not they're maybe missing a valuable gem or a coin or whatever that thing happens to be, right? So from a sluice box, this is exactly what Microsoft Sentinel intends to accomplish. You look at that zero trust and all those different pillars and all those things, that activity, that user and our network and their applications and all that stuff, everything that's working and going on in those things, we want to trust but verify. We have those tools in place, but then we want to catch the stuff that the other tools don't catch, or we want to catch the things that might be anomalous or might potentially one day be anomalous. We need to pull out, it's a bad way to put it, but we want to pull out that gold or those gems or those coins in our security data, right? And this is where Microsoft Sentinel absolutely comes into play. Sentinel is a SIEM, or Security Information Event Management System, and SOAR, or Security Orchestration, Automation, and Remediation, or Response. You're probably familiar with tools like this already, right? Microsoft Sentinel is not unlike things like from Splunk, QRadar, Logarithm. There's a bunch of other ones, right? It provides a central data store for security logs capable of supporting high event per second data collection, the EPS, right? And a rich set of analysis, visualization, and alerting solutions, right? It has to have all of this, all of these types of features and mechanisms built in. The SOAR component, this orchestration or automation piece, includes data connectors, solutions, automation rules, and playbooks. This automation helps dramatically reduce the things, or at least the repetitive tasks that you have to accomplish to look through the security data. One of the things I want to highlight here before we go on, because once I jump into my console, we're not going to talk about automation this time. That's maybe something we can cover a little bit later. Microsoft Sentinel has this orchestration built into it. I mentioned Splunk and QRadar and Logarithm. They have so this SOAR capability. They do today, right? But they're either add-ons, you have to pay extra for it, or I think even QRadar, you have to buy somebody else's that plugs in or whatever. This SOAR capability is built into Microsoft Sentinel. We believed when Microsoft Sentinel was released that this automation capability from an efficiency standpoint absolutely must be included with this type of tool. So it's included, something that comes with Microsoft Sentinel. So breaking this down by the functional areas here, okay, here's the primary values of Microsoft Sentinel for your organization. There's absolutely so much more than just these 6 squares, 6 boxes, right? But we've got to kind of focus somewhere as part of an overview. So as a single pane of glass, customers can see alerts from a wide range of security solutions. Not only alerts forwarded to Sentinel, but also alerts generated by Sentinel's own analytics rules, okay? As a central repository, it's easier to see across all of those different silos. You look at that zero trust model again, look at those different pillars, a central repository for everything that's going on within those different silos. It gives us a lot of value from that central pane of glass, right? As a ticket management solution, investigators can actually investigate, track, and close incidents right inside the Microsoft Sentinel console. In fact, I'll show you that here today when I jump in my own console. Sentinel at its core is a security monitoring solution that trust but verify. Not only does it consolidate alerts from other security tools, Sentinel has its own monitoring rules, machine learning, AI, behavioral analytics that's built in. Sentinel provides like another layer, that top layer protection, and can be the primary security monitoring solution when one doesn't exist already in your environment, right? If you don't have one of the other ones, and if you have questions about even running these things side by side and the value of that, we can have that discussion later. Sentinel has a variety of built-in automation capabilities. Mentioned that SOAR with automation rules. Can also use advanced automation through logic apps, right? Azure function apps and various APIs. This is an Azure group. You're probably very familiar with a lot of the different services that Azure has within that Microsoft Cloud. Understand that Sentinel is built on top of those already existing services. That playbook, that automation capability that I talked about, that's actually logic apps. We take advantage of the power of logic apps and Azure function apps to pull in that automation, which that actually makes it pretty easy for us to integrate and supply for our customers because it's already there, right? Sentinel makes hunting. If you're not familiar with this hunting process within any security operations center, hunting gives organizations the ability to look at those potential things that might exist within the organization from a security perspective that the tool itself didn't actually find. Microsoft Sentinel, anytime that you open up the console, understand the way that Microsoft develops their products. Every time you open that console, you always have the most current version. You're always the most up to date with the version, the features, and the threat intelligence, right? So that's a really good piece of comfort to know that anytime you open it up, you have the most current threat intel. You don't have to take the system down and do an upgrade. You don't have to take the system down and tell everybody, oh, our security tool is down. Please don't do anything really weird for the next 6 hours, right? Because of the way Microsoft develops the apps in this DevOps pipeline and services, it's always up to date. But there is still this hunting process. Probably heard about this, hunting is developing a hypothesis of something that you want to go look for within your environment based on what you know about the existing industry or the existing news. There may be at 4 a.m. a brand new threat identified and reported on TV news, CNBC, whatever it happens to be, and you see it when you're getting to your desk for work in the morning. Okay. And you know that when you pull up that console, it's going to be the most up to date. But if it came out at 4 a.m., there's probably not going to be some threat intelligence for that. Hunting gives you the ability to go in and do that hunting yourself to see if that thing that you heard about exists within your environment. And if it does, you're going to catch it, right? So you also have that capability within Microsoft Sentinel to be able to do some of those manual detections. So just to give us a point of reference, Microsoft Sentinel was released publicly in 2019 as Azure Sentinel. I heard Azure Sentinel mentioned earlier. We rebranded it not too long ago to Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel and all of our Defender products work across clouds. AWS, you can connect AWS and GCP to Microsoft Sentinel. You can connect your hybrid environment, your on-premises stuff to Microsoft Sentinel, right? So we kind of got rid of this whole everything's about Azure, because a lot of our customers are like, well, it's Azure Sentinel, so it only works with Microsoft products. That's not true. We want our customers to be able to secure their entire environment. So tools like Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is designed to be able to connect whatever you have in your environment, whether you're a Cisco shop or Palo Alto for your devices, or you're using AWS, you have applications and VMs spun up in AWS, you should be able to kind of use this central console to be able to manage and monitor that stuff. You can still do that, right? That's the reason why we got rid of that kind of that Azure branding, and now it's Microsoft Sentinel. So just recently we rebranded all these. Hopefully, a lot of you weren't absolutely offended by that rebranding. And again, like I said, in a couple hours, we're going to rebrand a couple other things. Don't hate. And I'll actually feel pretty good to be done with talking with you all by the time that happens. So you can tell Derek how frustrated you are with that. I don't know. So it's now Microsoft Sentinel. Knowing that this just went public in 2019, that bottom note is, I think, very important. As of our last financial reporting, we have over 15,000 active Microsoft Sentinel customers. That's pretty good, knowing that we've not been around. Microsoft Sentinel's not been around for a long time. We've not been around as long as the Splunks and everybody else, QRadar and all that stuff. But we have something, I believe, that is very exciting and very significant when it comes to helping that produce that trust but verify, helping produce that sluice box potentially within your environment. So like I said, it's not been around for a long time, but we do have a lot of customers using it. And as we have used the same development process for all of our Azure services for Microsoft Sentinel, it has come a long way in a very quick period of time. Forrester already recognizes Microsoft Sentinel as a top SIEM. Gartner, I promise you, within the next couple months, you also hear from them that they also think it's a top SIEM. So kind of get ready for that. We've done a lot, put a lot of effort into this and a lot of investment over the past 3 years. So Microsoft offers this new kind of modern approach to this SIEM, right? Entirely cloud native. It's never been an on-prem tool. We can pull in the on-prem stuff and work with the on-prem stuff, but it was always built in the cloud for a very specific reason. When Microsoft started our own migration to the cloud, one of the things that we identified as gaps was this SIEM, or the security component, because at the time that we started our own migration, all of those tools like Microsoft Sentinel were all on-prem. Those organizations and companies, because we used the same products that our customers, we used Splunk up until, I dare say, a couple of years ago. And we used Logarithm and all the other stuff, right? We had different departments within Microsoft. Everybody kind of used their same stuff. We have now, fortunately, all consolidated on Microsoft Sentinel, which is absolutely amazing. And we do the same, kind of eat your own dog food type of situation. But this has never existed on-prem. It's always been cloud born, always been cloud based. It takes advantage of those cloud. Again, we're all Azure folks here. We know the power of Azure. We know VMs. We know VM scale sets. We know efficiency. We know how clustering works within Azure. We know the power of all this stuff and how it provides value. Well, why can't we have a security tool that takes advantage of all that value? And that's what Microsoft Sentinel does. That's one of the reasons why it was developed in the cloud and only in the cloud, and then pull in the connections from everywhere else, right? Microsoft Sentinel empowers you with that scale and flexibility, and obviously the speed of the cloud detects complex evolving threats across massive amounts of data. You literally send as much or as little data as you want to with it, and the way Azure works, it's going to accept as much or as little as you take it, kind of as a pay-as-you-go type of situation. Gives you everything you need to expedite incident response, streamlining investigations with robust incidents, and equipping you with built-in automation. And finally, with these efficiency gains, which the cloud is what provides all of this efficiency, Microsoft Sentinel provides the ability to finally be proactive and find and stop threats instead of just, a week from now going, oh my goodness, we got hacked a week ago. Wow, how do I report this to my manager? How do we talk to our comms team? How do we get this reported if you're a public company? It's going to allow you, like that sluice box, it's going to allow that stuff to kind of bubble up and be able to identify it before it becomes an issue, right? All right, so let me switch modes here and jump into my own Microsoft console to give you that perspective. I want to talk about some very specific areas. And I'm going to pull up Teams on one screen here. Just a look. All right. Hopefully everybody can see this new screen. I want to see if anybody else. Still just 9. That's good. How many people do we have? 1, 2, 3. All right. Very good. All right. So this is the Microsoft Sentinel console. In fact, let's start from home. How about that? This is the Azure portal, right? I stay in Azure Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel all the time. But you can just search for Microsoft Sentinel. It's really easy to stand up. In fact, that's one of the things that we're extremely excited about too. A customer can literally stand up Microsoft Sentinel in less than 10 minutes. You go in, find Microsoft Sentinel, create a log analytics workspace for it. Log analytics workspace obviously is the data store for the data that gets ingested that we can look at for our alerting. Create a log analytics workspace for Microsoft Sentinel and click the go button, and Microsoft Sentinel has stood up, like I said, in less than 10 minutes. Actually less than 5. I say 10 minutes just in case, because anybody that's worked within Azure for any period of time knows that sometimes even the browser can cause issues getting to refresh because it is the web. But what I want to do, just to kind of, again, focus on this, because this is the Microsoft Sentinel console. This is a really nice front end. This is the entry point for the Microsoft Sentinel console. So you can see my own environment here. Remember I said I really love $6 Million Man. My entire demo environment is $6millionman.com. In fact, if we went in and looked at my Azure AD accounts, they're all characters from the TV show, and some of them even have the proper profile picture, but we won't have to focus on that here real quick. But this is the console. This is what it looks like. This gives analysts a really quick overview of what their day looks like or what the past 24 hours, right? I can change and look back longer if I want to do that. It always defaults to 24 hours because, as we know, folks that work in security, when we're working through incidents and investigations, we always want to work with the most current data, and we want to work through that data within the next 24 hours. So again, we're always through this policy and procedure, so we're always working with the most current data. So this is 24 hours. This is what it looks like. These are the events and alerts that I've seen in my environment over time. I tell you, I've had 5 alerts within the past 24 hours. That's really, really low. So an organization, potentially like some of yours, where you have a multitude of devices, multitude of users, different things that are connected to Microsoft Sentinel, you're going to have a lot more alerts. Most of them, hopefully, fingers crossed, are going to be informational or low severity. And I'll show you, see, I only have a few mediums. These are things that I've created to kind of look through here, but it shows me the top 5 most recent incidents. I have some things in here I'll show you here shortly. Any data source anomalies, when data has started flowing or being ingested in a spike or more so than any other time. You can see at 12 p.m. today, this device file events, which I know comes from Microsoft Defender for Endpoints. So that's probably something I want to take a look at a little bit later. Azure activity, I'm pulling in Azure activity in here. So anything that happens within Azure, it's sending it to Microsoft Sentinel. So Sentinel can actually filter and look through it to see if there's something anomalous. Maybe there's a user that has elevated rights that's doing something maybe they shouldn't be doing or something they've not done in the past. And it might not be anything nefarious, but at least I know about it and I can go take a look to figure out if it's nefarious or not. But I want to focus again kind of on this idea around Microsoft Sentinel and this sluice box, right? And getting back to that zero trust model and those different pillars, right? So we saw the identity, we saw the applications, we saw the network and everything as part of that zero trust model and those different pillars that exist within your environment. Any tool like Microsoft Sentinel that ingests data, ingests log files from anywhere, any tool worth its salt needs to be able to look at and identify and be able to clearly correlate the data that's being ingested into it, right? It needs to be able to collect data literally from anywhere, right? I talked about earlier our rebranding of taking Azure off Sentinel and putting the Microsoft name on there because it does support these different kind of hybrid modes and different clouds and things like that. So I kind of want to start there. What we call within Microsoft Sentinel are data connectors. So we stand up Azure Sentinel. It takes less than 10 minutes. And the next thing that we want to do when we stand up Microsoft Sentinel is determine what we have in our environment and what we want to connect to Microsoft Sentinel to use as that sluice box to uncover potentially those gems of security information that are not being captured other places. So if we take a look here, as I mentioned, if I search filter by Amazon, you can connect AWS to Microsoft Sentinel. So we're good. We're covered, right? Say you were a Palo Alto shop. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Very easy to connect one of what we call data connectors. Very easy to go into it. I'm going to open the connector page for Palo Alto, show you what that looks like. This one, if you're familiar with these types of tools, a lot of times these Palo Alto devices on-prem, you go into the menu of that device and you create a forwarding rule for those log files to send somewhere, right? You go into the Palo Alto data connector within Microsoft Sentinel, you see very quickly, we give you the exact instructions of how to connect that Palo Alto device to Microsoft Sentinel. These aren't Microsoft's instructions. These instructions come directly from Palo Alto. So all of the data connectors that we have here within Microsoft Sentinel, all the guidance, the connectors and everything comes directly from that originating vendor, right? We're not trying to recreate the wheel of collecting data, right? You have data, you need to be able to connect it here. We try to make it absolutely as easy as possible. We don't need to develop and create and deploy and give our customers data connectors because there's instructions on how to do that everywhere because we've done this in an industry uniform way, right? But because we want our customers to be able to connect their data quickly and efficiently, we do have data connectors. So here's the instructions on how to get this connected. Create your Linux box, your Linux forwarding machine, Install the Ceph collector on the Linux machine, make sure the ports are open. You can run this little test, right, to make sure that the ports are open and that the connection is there. There's validating the connectivity. And then you're forwarding those log files to this new syslog forwarder, and that Palo Alto device is connected to Microsoft Sentinel. That type of connector is probably the hardest to connect, and it's not hard to connect. That's probably a bad way to put it. It's just there's more steps to it because you have to have your forwarding system in place. You have to have those forwarding rules. You have to know about your Palo Alto devices to set those forwarding rules to forward to that syslog server. You have to install an agent, and then everything else just kind of works. Our own products, what we call first party connectors, like here's one for Microsoft 365 Defender. Again, we're trying to make this absolutely as easy as possible, right? So if we look at something like Defender, let's use Office, I tell you what. Use Office. Office is a good one to use. Office 365, by the way, and all these Defender things that you just saw me kind of pull up there from the filter. When you stand up Microsoft Sentinel and you enable those connectors, those are always free. You can connect Microsoft stuff. There's a number of those, the Microsoft stuff, that Defender, Office, a few other things that you can connect to Microsoft Azure activity that you can connect to Microsoft Sentinel for free, right? Doesn't cost you anything. When you pull things from on-prem or from other clouds, yeah, there's going to be a cost for ingestion, but it's relatively low based on what Microsoft Sentinel provides. So showing you the simplicity of this, how simple some of these connectors are. So a lot of our customers, one of the first things they say, they're like, oh my goodness, I know from my organization, we're really good at securing our network devices. We're really good at, Palo Alto or Cisco, whatever it is. We have a really strong network security team, but it always boils down to these silly things, these bad habits that our users have, or they don't really understand how technology works. They click on things they shouldn't, or they do things, they save things in OneDrive that's malware. Oh my goodness, we've been hit by this so many times. You can connect Office 365 to Microsoft Sentinel for free, and our customers are like, oh my goodness, I want to use Microsoft Sentinel just for this. And literally, if I go into this data connector for Office 365, I obviously have these connected myself. But if I didn't, all I would do is just go in here and connect Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams, which SharePoint also includes OneDrive, right? Everybody knows that. Click Apply Changes. It takes literally 3 seconds or less, and I'm connected, and then the data starts flowing, right? So I have data from SharePoint and OneDrive. Teams, not so much on this account. SharePoint, Exchange, a lot of email activity in this $6millionman.com account that I have running here. But you can see the information, how quickly it would, right? So start flowing into Microsoft Sentinel. Another piece of this that I absolutely do want to cover today during our time. So I talked about a tool like Microsoft Sentinel needs to be able to do that very important thing, connect data, connect it from anywhere, make sure all our devices, our users, everything, our logins and stuff are covered, and do it very quickly and easily and efficiently. But the next thing that we need to be able to do, once we have the data, we need to do something with it. The other thing that we need to do is analyze that data for security things, right? Again, getting back to that sluice box. We've got that dirt, right, flowing through the water. Now we need someone sitting there analyzing it, going, oh my goodness, we almost missed this. In Microsoft Sentinel, it's not a person. In Microsoft Sentinel, it's the machine learning and the artificial intelligence that we have built in based on this crazy, silly, really easy to learn query language called KQL. But every one of these data connectors that we have within Microsoft Sentinel, even Office 365, has a slew. And I was kind of trying to be ironic there with sluice box, but slew didn't quite work out. Of what we call analytics rules. And literally, you enable these things. I have a bunch in use. I have some that I've not enabled. I probably want to do that a little bit later. These are new. That means that there's new threat intelligence that Microsoft has fed into my console, and I can go in and enable these things so it, I'm covered for those things that everybody knows about based on these MITRE tactics and these techniques. But I can enable these. For example, user agent search for Log4j. Everybody remembers the Log4j thing that happened at the beginning of the year. There's actually 7 different data sources, web application firewall, Zscaler is part of this, Office 365, Azure Active Directory stuff. Enabling this for Office 365 is going to force this analytics rule to run on a schedule. I think it's by default every 24 hours, it's going to go and look through the data to determine if this thing that we enabled exists within our environment. If it does, it's going to generate an alert. If that alert gets generated and it gets generated once or 100 times, it's going to collect all of that information and stick it in a bucket that we like to call incidents within Microsoft Sentinel. Incidents is the occurrence of whatever that thing that happened within the environment. Incidents are little buckets of information that contains everything from the thing that happened, all the alerts that were generated in response to that thing happening, the user that did it, the PC or host name or device that user was using, where they used it from. Maybe they saved something that sent us as Office. Maybe they saved something in OneDrive or SharePoint, and we're going to be able to detect that, right? So those two things are absolutely critically important. Connecting data literally from anywhere, from any device, and then analyzing that data and doing it in an efficient way where I don't have to worry about that, right? I'm getting the most current threat intel. Every time I open up Microsoft Sentinel, it's always the most current information. And I can rest assured that when I enable these analytics rules that are supplied by Microsoft and continually updated and supplied by Microsoft, that I'm always going to have the most current threat intel. And so and this is the other thing I want to talk about today, when these alerts and things are generated, because I have that data connected and because I've enabled those those analytics rules to look for things, I'm going to see stuff like this, right? PowerShell execution. This is a silly one, right? I just wrote this analytics rule myself just because PowerShell executes on everybody's device, even whether you know it or not. PowerShell is utilized quite a bit. But as we also know from a security perspective, PowerShell sort of could have the tendency to be something potentially nefarious, particularly if that thing was run outside of the system context, run by a user who shouldn't potentially have access or ability to be able to run that. So if I look at something like PowerShell execution and I go look at the full details of this, this gives me really, really awesome information that I can use for my investigation as an analyst. This was listed in the system as medium severity, right? So it's maybe it's not critical because we do have the different severities listed in here, right? It's not high. It's not something I absolutely have to jump on because whoever created this analytics rule determined that based on my environment, it's not critical, but it's something that we need to kind of take a look at and be mindful of, right? So it comes in medium severity. I may be at that point within that 24-hour cycle of part of my team that, now it's time to kind of look at these medium severity stuff to see if there's anything indicative of issue, all right? So part of this bucket that I have here, there's a nice information pane that we have over on this side, but I can also take a look at the alert that was generated. There was one alert that was generated. It's not a long list of things. So this PowerShell thing was run once, over the past 24 hours. Again, from an analyst perspective, probably not a big thing. But then I can also take a look at the entities that are associated with this alert. And I can see a few things here. I do see that the PowerShell was run by local service. It's actually it wasn't run outside of the system, but it ran based on these service accounts, right? And it was run on these hosts. So I actually had two different hosts. This one's my actual local computer. This is my cloud PC that I have connected to Microsoft Sentinel. And this is the person that ran that PowerShell thing, or the user context that was live when that PowerShell component was run by the local service account, right? But that's really, really great information. That one simple, silly analytics rule, because I have that data connected, because I have that running every 24 hours, and I can adjust that schedule. If in your environment you determine that it's more critical, or this happens more often, you need to know about it more often, you can change that schedule. I can run it every hour if I want to run it that way, right? The analytics rule. I have this set up for 24 hours. So this is only capturing the things that have happened within the past 24 hours. In fact, if you look at this was actually created today, right, at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's when the PowerShell thing was run, right? But it captured it because it was within the past 24 hours. As a ticketing system within Microsoft Sentinel, this incident, you can use this as a ticketing system, right? Maybe I've identified that it was no big deal. It really wasn't. I'm going to stick it as low because in the future, I want my tool to be more intelligent. If this person, this Rod Trent, and how all of this transpired was literally nothing, right? I'm going to set it as low. So in the future, it's going to be set as low, right? I'm going to change the status. I'm probably going to close this out, give it some kind of classification. Suspicious but expected, right? I still want to be notified about these types of occurrences in the future, but it's a non-issue, right? Non-issue. I can leave that as part of that help desk. I can add additional comments if I want to do that. I can add as much. I can add pictures. I can links. I can attach files. I can do all kinds of things here. I can also adjust the owner. As I mentioned, $6 Million Man. There's Jamie Summers. Let's see. I think Lee Majors is in here too. Oh, his picture has not been updated. I have to update that. Anyway, we'll assign it to Bigfoot because his picture is valid. And let's just go ahead. And once we go out and look again and do a little refresh, that PowerShell execution is now closed, and I've accomplished that. All because I connected, all because I stood up Microsoft Sentinel. I connected the data that I needed to be connected for, and then I enabled those analytics rules to tell me about that thing that I wanted to be notified about. All right. That's kind of what the overview and what I wanted to kind of cover today. Hopefully that's of interest enough that, yeah, that was kind of cool. And you'd love to have me back to talk about a little bit deeper into this stuff. Anybody with any questions? Because we are at, what are we? About 5 minutes till. Yeah, and there's my little notification, 5 minutes left in your scheduled time.
Perfect timing. So if anybody's got any questions for Rod, ask them now. If you want, I can shut the recording down and you can ask them off recording. So